If we imagine Corsica, we think of the coast, the beaches, and the sea that surrounds the island. Yet there's a lot more to discover. Corsica has an extraordinary diversity of landscapes. A variety of exquisite and unexplored areas can be found when venturing off the beaten track. Mountain valleys, villages perched along the coast. Throughout the 4 different seasons, this stunning island changes its appearance several times. The landscape transforms continually as it blooms and flourishes. It's alive. At the start of the summer, the calm hush of the waves and the wind penetrates the silence at the Gulf of Porto. The sounds of nature are evocative of the end of the world. The vegetation that covers most of Corsica is, and always had been, impenetrable. Scrubland dominates the coastal land. This form of vegetation is typical in the Mediterranean and has come to identify the island. This dense vegetation was once home to many islanders. Bandits who wanted to evade the authorities or to hide from their enemies made their homes in this green kingdom.
When it gets too much, we have to turn around. We have to look for another passage. We have to force our way. I did it with my clients last year. We got into such a state, I almost had a riot on my hands. It doesn't go very far. It goes on for about 200 meters. It's really dirty. There are large brooms everywhere. They're covered in thorns, up high, everywhere. They tear everything. You get covered in blood. You just need to force your way through. It takes a few minutes. If you're not used to it, you get trapped. You get trapped and you scream.
Scrubland grows when an area is no longer inhabited. Like elsewhere on the island, stone buildings that date back to ancient times can be found underneath the scrubland. Farmers built huts on the Cap Corse slopes to store the wheat that they harvested here and as a place to shelter during bad weather. Men worked the land here for centuries. It has since been abandoned and become covered in scrubland.
This house is amazing. It's magnificent. It's a great example of the way that things were. It's likely that grain was stored here because the surrounding area was probably made up of wheat fields. It's hard to imagine what it was like. Corsica was a garden. It's important to understand that. It was a garden that started in Bonifacio and ended up in Cap Corse. All of the pathways that we can see here were roads that were built for transporting goods, not just people, goods and livestock. This area has now come to represent the wilderness. If Corsicans from the last century were to be transported here, then they would feel humiliated. It would signify that they were unable to preserve their terrain. It's true. I have to admit that I despise the bushland. Yes, it smells good and it looks nice on a postcard, etc. But I'm a farmer. The bush is my #1 enemy. When I look at it, as much as I appreciate its aesthetic beauty, it makes me very sad because it means that people no longer occupy the terrain. The wilderness is captivating, but we must claim our place here.
Many Corsican lives were lost during the 2 world wars, and the island became identified as a vacation area. The French government decided to develop the island's economy through its greatest asset, its natural resources. Major tourism development projects were put in place, targeting the island's remarkable natural sites. An ambitious project was developed on the Sanguinaire Islands in the Gulf of Porto. It included a marina, a heliport, a casino, sports fields, hotels with over 15,000 rooms. A large concrete jetty was built here in the natural environment by a developer who wanted to build 100 houses.
He was called, I can't remember, but as long as he went about things quietly, then people didn't mind, huh? But the day that he decided to build a large estate, he started to have problems.
As far as I'm concerned, it's not that I'm against construction and development in Corsica, but I think that there are places to build and there are places to dream. And I think that here is a place to dream.
Is it possible to reconcile nature and tourism on such an unstable island? Is it possible to develop an island without losing its soul or transforming the landscape? The coast remains at the heart of all development issues in Corsica. Every summer, nearly 3 million tourists visit Corsica. In the winter, an estimated 280,000 inhabitants live here. People come from all over Europe to admire this beautiful island and to holiday in paradise on the Mediterranean coast. For many, Corsica is a long coastline of beautiful beaches that stretch out one after another. The coastline has long been considered as Corsica's greatest selling point. The beaches, the bays, and the creeks are a holidaymaker's paradise. The Corsica that we see on postcards has been the biggest source of income on the island for many years. The Calanche of Piana, the Gulf of Girolata, and the Gulf of Porto, holidaymakers come to Corsica to swim in UNESCO World Heritage Sites. The Scandola Peninsula has been named as the most beautiful natural reserve in France and is a marine protected area. There are no roads, no buildings, no pathways. It's a natural kingdom. Millions of years ago, lava, rhyolite, basalt, and magma erupted in fury from this volcano. This rugged landscape originates in the Estrel Massif in the south of France. It dates back to the time when Corsica was connected to the continent. In the Tertiary period, a volcanic eruption caused the Massif to break apart, and Corsica separated from the mainland. The sea rhythmically strikes the vertical reliefs that line the coast. This backlash effect creates waves that reach up to several kilometers. The sea is choppy and very frothy, which makes it uncomfortable for boat travel. Even boats that are equipped with new technology struggle in these waters. The sea is a formidable force. The Scandola Peninsula Natural Reserve is an area known for both its marine life and its terrestrial splendor. It is undisturbed by man. Coral, gorgonians, lobsters, and shellfish have created their underwater kingdom and thrive alongside groupers, moray eels, mullets, bream, and many other fish.
There are more groupers here than in any other area in the Mediterranean. There are more than 700 of them in an area of almost 100 acres. This is extraordinary. Each fish weighs more than 60 pounds, 60 to 90 pounds. Large species of fish thrive here. Barracudas, groupers, corbs, different species of bream, new species such as the royal grouper, and various types of coral. Coral is prevalent in the area because it's well protected here. We're lucky to have coral at accessible depths in shallow waters.
Red coral is a fragile limestone formation. It is abundant in these pure waters, more so than anywhere else in the Mediterranean. It can be found approximately 10 meters from the surface. These enigmatic marine caves are part of the rich and mysterious biodiversity of Scandola. Narwhal shrimps have an aversion to light, and they generally exist deep underwater, more than 200 meters from the surface. On the rocky peaks of the peninsula, an osprey feeds his family. This rare raptor has become emblematic of this reserve. Pink flamingos migrate here from Sardinia, Camargue, and Turkey in order to spend the winter on the ponds on the eastern plains of Corsica. More than 20,000 birds inhabit the Biguglia Pond. It is the third most inhabited pool in France. In Corsica, there's an intrinsic and deep-rooted connection between animals, the earth, and man. This relationship was forged over centuries of work, poverty, and a nomadic existence on the plains and mountains. Rural civilization permeated throughout Corsica and became its foundation. The shepherd lifestyle is central to the identity of the island. Transhumance occurs in the area that extends from the north to the south of the island, more than 100 miles along the mountain ridge. During the summer, Jean-Felix's pigs live among the beech, ash, oak, and chestnut trees in the Cuchillon Plateau forests. It is Corsica's highest plain and consists of 17,000 acres of vast prairie land. For centuries, the Corsican valleys resonated with the sounds of transhumance. It provided a vital social link between communities. This archaic model is not typical of modern-day Corsica. Transhumance no longer occurs on such a large scale as it did in the past, and more than 80% of the sheep fields have been abandoned. When the libeccio, the westerly or southwesterly wind rises, the sea becomes treacherous. The libeccio, the tramontane, the gregal, the sirocco, and the punant winds are all present in Corsica. The force of the spray and the passage of time creates a veritable mineral masterpiece.
Look at the mountains and the rocks. It's very rugged here. The wind is master of the terrain. It's been known to unearth rocks. It's astonishing. It's obvious when we look at the Tifoni. The Tifoni are a geological phenomenon. People come here to observe these naturally occurring phenomenon. They're astounded by the effect, and the effect that wind can have on stone, a resource that many see as being impossible to destroy. But here, it's obvious to all just how strong the wind can be. I often say that the Strait of Bonifacio, the channel that starts in Vocapini, is an area, well, let's say that the wind here can wear you down. You can't control the wind here. Even if you surf all day long, it's the wind that controls you. When the wind starts to blow, it doesn't stop. Very impressive.
When summer is at its peak, most of the plants start losing their leaves in order to retain water. The leaves turn into essential concentrates. This causes a fire hazard. It's difficult to contain a fire if the wind is in full force. On July 31st, 1989, fires swept across Corsica and up to Bastia. 30,000 acres of vegetation went up in smoke, including the olive trees in Balagne and Nebieu. This had a devastating effect on the economy of the region that depended on its olive oil production. In the 90s, a selection of olive oil producers went back into production. The Corsican olive oil trade is rising from the ashes. Harvesting is done in the typical Corsican tradition. The olives are left to mature on the trees until they fall naturally. Dark black olives fall into the nets that are strung around the trees. The olives do not touch the ground, and therefore acidity is kept to a minimum.
This style of working dates back over the last 6 centuries. Can you imagine how long it took to grow this tree? And it burned. Even if the trunk is completely twisted and full of holes, if you clean it, the following year it will produce olives. They'd been abandoned for 70 years, 80 years. It's amazing. They're so resistant. It's been struck by lightning, everything throughout the centuries. They resist everything and grow back. It's incredible. It's extraordinary.
The ground here is perfect for olive trees. Corsica is reviving an industry that it is already an expert in. An ancient watermill is still in operation in a small hamlet called Terre-Rose. This mill has been grinding olives and chestnut flowers since 1660. The Scartabelli brothers, the last millers in Cap Corse, keep the mill in action in memory of their father.
For me, the mill has many, many memories. And well, it's good to see it in operation. Someone is very happy up there, my father, because, well, he was very attached to the mill. The mill is the past, the present, and I hope it will be part of the future.
The Terre-Rose mill plays a key role in the village. People meet here while purchasing olive oil or chestnut flower. Each time that the Scartabelli brothers commemorate the new season, the villagers come together to celebrate, just like in days gone by.
Well, if people stop bringing produce for the mill to grind, then it will go out of operation and close down. When someone tells me I have 20 pounds of corn, I get the mill ready. I clean the wheels, I put everything in place, and I call them 20 minutes later to tell them it's ready. At least the mill is still working. For as long as it's in operation, it's active, it's alive. It's also nice for the elderly people here. It's their heritage. You understand what I mean? This mill fed many people, and it should continue to do so.
The chestnut is the most iconic tree in Corsica. It grows on the San Pedrone slopes, the highest peak of Castagniccia. Chestnuts are everywhere. The region takes its name from the tree, and the habitat is defined by chestnut tree cultivation. Chestnut collecting is an ancient tradition in Corsica and takes place in most of the villages.
The trees here are really big. I'd say that they are about 400 years old, easily. We also have younger trees that are about 200 years old, at least. If you plant a chestnut tree, then you'll see how long it takes to grow. They are at least that old. It's hard work. What's already been done and what needs to be done. It's impressive. This area has been cleared. It took a lot of work, and there's still more work to be done.
The future of this island lies in the natural and human resources. The work areas are also fun for children who will forever remember playing underneath the chestnut trees.
If there's a hole, it's rotten. And if it's rotten, the rotten ones are white. They're rotten. The white ones, these ones look nice. There's nothing wrong with them. Look, this one has a hole in it. Look, look.
It's autumn now. We've taken the goats downhill. The weather's changed. It rains every day. This makes life difficult. It usually carries on until December. When it rains like this constantly, the goats get agitated. They don't like getting wet. In Corsica, people buy young goats for Christmas. This is why we bring them down here, so that the young goats are here in time for us to sell for Christmas. I've been around goats since I was 2.5. I know how to deal with them. My grandmother worked with goats. She tried to dissuade me from working with them, but it didn't work. We know what to expect. We know the work that's involved. We know that the weather can cause problems and that some years can be better than others.
Many people in Corsica aspire to live and work in the countryside. It's more than just a lifestyle choice. It's a commitment to their village and their region, and an attempt to prevent their island from becoming nothing more than a tourist destination. Shortly before the winter, the mountain becomes a hostile territory. The Camputil Plateau turns into a hunting ground. The mountain boar terrorizes the scrubland and the mountain slopes. When the shepherds abandoned these areas, this wild animal proliferated. It causes damage to the crops and creates havoc in the villages.
This is a beech nut. They grow on beech trees. It's the fruit of the beech tree. They fall during this season. They love it. That's Phil.
All of the Corsican revolutions have been centered around Corte. It's the capital of the interior of the island, the eagle's nest of Corsica. It was on these streets that the dream of a free Corsica flourished. General Pasquale Paoli, a Corsican patriot and leader, came from here. He was a Democrat, a trailblazer, a man of the Enlightenment. In winter, an animal that can be traced back more than 8,000 years makes its home in the Ascou Valley. The mouflon is a type of wild sheep that came from Persia with the first settlers who reached the island with their herds. They were tame and lived in the plains. Over the course of time, they took refuge in the mountains. They were hunted until they became an endangered species in the 50s. The Corsican mouflon is now a protected species. Their territory covers 2 game reserves in the Ascou and Bavella valleys, and over 1,000 acres have been dedicated to protecting them.
Corsicans don't usually go to the mountains during the summer months because it's crowded. In the winter, the mountains belong to us.
In winter, people who work in the hiking industry go back to their roots and explore the mountains. They come to reconnect with nature in the silent and snowy foothills of the Tafunat mountain. Snow represents hope. Water. Water is an essential commodity in Corsica. It has enabled rural communities and mountain regions to continue to thrive. Over the course of time, the powerful flow of water has created countless gorges and a series of steep valleys. The Liamon, the Risanese, the Gravone, the Taravo, the Golo, the Tavignano, the Restonica. 24 rivers cover more than half of the island. Lake Nino is one of the most exquisite areas in the Corsican mountains. It is the second largest lake in Corsica, and it is the source of the Tavignano Pozzine. This is the pastoral region of Niola. Cows, sheep, and horses are brought here during the summer months. In spring, the scrubland is a veritable display of colors and scents. Broom, lavender, thyme, mastic. There are more than 100 different species of plants here. People come here to pick the berries that grow on arbutus and myrtle trees to produce wine. They also pick rosemary, everlastings, and the flowers that produce wild honey. The Casa Maggioli is one of the most famous processions in Corsica. It takes place in the Niole Valley. They sing praise to the Virgin while forming a spiral. This is called the Granitola. It's a snail-shaped procession that twists and turns. It symbolizes the passage between the seasons and between life and death. It's a pagan tradition that dates back to ancient times. Mary is the true sovereign of the island. In 1730, the Corsicans chose her as their patron saint of protection in order to help them in the war against the Genoese. The people here are very religious. Churches, monasteries, and chapels have been built all over the island. The religious history of Corsica dates back to the 6th century when the Pope declared the island part of the Holy See. Christianity has had a profound effect on the culture and landscape of the entire island. Corsica has more religious buildings than any other region in France. Churches and immense steeples have been built in the heart of each village, even in the villages that are perched on the highest hilltops. They cling to the mountainside in among the rustic houses. Corsican villages are centered around protection. This is representative of the island as a whole. Men built stone paths across the mountainside with their bare hands so that they could travel across the land with their animals. They conquered the immense lengths as they made their way through the mountainous terrain. This is the real Corsica. Here in the mountains, we see a variety of peaks, a granite fortress, chaotic rock formations, and an arid, brutal, and savage landscape. In the 70s, 4 mountain guides mapped out the GR20 pathway. It is the most difficult trek in Europe. This is the Fralimonti, the path that leads through the mountains. It crosses Corsica from north to south via the main massifs that make up the island.
This is a critical area on this GR path, and it's the trickiest part. This is the place that all hikers worry about. There are areas that are steeper and more physically difficult, but technically, when carrying heavy bags, this area is the most difficult. But it's not very far. People make a mountain out of a molehill about it.
The GR20 passes through the Regional Natural Park of Corsica. The park rangers are dressed in green, and they often provide assistance to hikers. Each summer, more than 20,000 people travel across these slopes. It is the most crowded mountain route in Europe. The GR20 slopes are long and steep, and the trail often looks like a chasm. Initially, it was mapped out as an alpine route for sports people in a rocky area that was previously untouched by man. Inexperienced mountaineers should not take this path without guidance or assistance. There aren't any places to stay yet. There are a few stops along the route with the shepherds. It's a good way to meet Corsicans. Over the years, shepherds have become companions or guides. Over the last few decades, this route has become a world-renowned trek for hikers all over the world. The GR20 continues south over the mountains towards the Bavella Massif. Away from the crowded GR20 hiking trail, the Monte Cinto Massif is reserved only for the experts. The mighty Tafunatu dominates this area. It is the product of many violent volcanic eruptions and part of the Estural Mountain Massif. It covers over 200 meters of peaks. In the early 20th century, German climbers opened the first mountain climbing routes here on the Paglia Orba and the Tafunatu.
Between Tafunatu and Paglia Orba, there is a place that has a special feel to it. It's amazing. There's a sort of door there between the east side and the west side. The other side is complete and utter wilderness. It's like there's a door that gives access from one side to the other. The Tafunatu dominates the view of the Gulf of Porto and G.E.I.E. It's really different on the other side. This is the far end, and the summit that reaches the furthest above sea level.
Les sommets et la mer, quoi. C'est les 2000 les plus proches de la mer.
During the last century, the Corsicans abandoned the mountains and migrated to the large coastal cities. Bastia is a typical example of a Genoese city. For many years, the ancient Italian Republic citadel has been the military and economic capital of Corsica. It is a walled city and was built in Italian style. Bastia is one of the most important ports in the Mediterranean. Over 2 million passengers travel through it per year. Ajaccio is the capital of the south of Corsica. Napoleon Bonaparte was born in this imperial city. In the 19th century, the city became a fashionable resort and has since attracted the bourgeoisie from across Europe. All of the towns along the coast are either citadels or fortresses and were built by the Genoese. Calvi has never been conquered despite the numerous attacks carried out on it by the French and the British fleets. Calvi has now become the tourist capital of the Balagna region. According to legend, Odysseus fought valiantly against the winds here. His fleet of 10 ships ran aground in front of this magnificent limestone proscenium arch, the white cliffs of Bonifacio. Bonifacio is where the nation ends, where France ends. For many centuries, this part of Corsica was a critical place in military battle. It marks the border and separates Corsica from the rest of the Mediterranean. Bonifacio is the most beautiful natural harbor in the Mediterranean. Powder kegs in the cliffs, chains blocking the port, barricades lining the edges of the peninsula. The military presence and effect is strikingly obvious. In the 70s, this area was once again put on the map when a marine park was developed here uniting Corsica and Sardinia in a biodiversity protection project. The flagship of the Bonifacio Natural Reserve is the Lavezzi Archipelago, a conservatory that cultivates fauna and flora that is specific to the Mediterranean. Corsica isn't a particularly easy place to discover on a first visit. It is vast and varied and is an island of many paradoxes. It is made up of imposing coastal towns, windy mountaintops, gorges, rivers, valleys, and hilltop villages. Each person that visits Corsica can, if they commit themselves fully to the task, navigate their own unique and personal journey and discovery of the island.